Let go.
Oh, familiar faces. I see. Jasmine, Joe, my #1 fans. Let me plug in this mic. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to join.
I can tell you right now, when it comes to market valuation, that when you're negotiating.
All right, we still got more people joining. If you guys have any questions right now, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. If not, give us a few minutes as we let people chime in. This meeting is not live anywhere besides my private mastermind. So if you guys want to invite anybody, shoot them a message with the Zoom link. And go ahead and let them know that there will be a recording, but it won't be posted for a while from now. All right, we still got people joining. What are we? 2 minutes in. Yeah, I usually give everybody about 5 minutes to join in before we get things going. As you guys know, today's masterclass will be on appointment setting. So I believe the last event we had, it was on how to earn 6 figures your first year as a sales professional. Well, a lot of times, if it's your first year as a sales professional, you're gonna have to start off as an appointment setter. So we're gonna be talking about appointment setting, how to move up from appointment setting, how to double your income as an appointment setter, which is the biggest topic. Yeah, Carlos, you got a team meeting. That's okay if you got a team meeting, bro. You gotta hit those dials. Make sure you're hitting your numbers. Please mute yourself if you're not muted yet, and if you have questions, drop them in the chat. All right, 1 minute away. All right, let's go ahead. Let's get it going. 4 minutes in. I want to introduce you guys to my special guest. If you guys can see, I don't know. I'm trying to find Pat in this meeting room. Pat, you around?
On my side, I'm right next to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, where is he? There's more people in the Zoom room than I thought.
Man.
I was like, oh wow. Okay. So Patrick here, he works with a company that it's not the agency model, but what they do is they pretty much handle all the appointment setting for their clients. So me, myself, I believe I've worked with thousands of setters at this point to some extent, with YouTube videos, tutorials, and recruiting, and even some of the people in my private coaching program who are in here right now. Patrick has worked with more setters than myself. He's very much so hands-on with all of the setters that he works with, and developing strategies to help them improve, not only on a like one-on-one level, but like to a client level, to improve results all the way down the line, which is, if the company wins, everybody wins. So Patrick has worked with some of the biggest clients in our industry. As you guys know, it's like we're not in that big of an industry. Like high ticket sales has only been referred to as high ticket sales for like a few years. So we kind of all know each other. And if you know Pat, he's a killer at building out systems for setters. And not only that, but Pat is really hands-on with the sales reps himself. So working with the sales reps is kind of Pat's reservoir. So he'll help the setters out on a more one-on-one basis to help them perfect their craft, which is something you don't see anybody do in this industry. You don't really see people, offering help to setters. Like setters get very little help. It's like, hustle harder. That's what everybody tells setters. It's freaking hustle harder. Just hit the phones.
That's really how it is.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. And if you guys know me, I own High Ticket Simple. I work for coaching sales as a recruiter. I have some of my clients in here are extremely successful that we worked with almost on a one-on-one basis. So without further ado, Pat, I'll let you give your little introduction. I hope that was good enough for you. And anyway.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, super stoked to be bringing you guys some of the content that I've been working on with my internal team for the past year and a half, 2 years, and some of the systems that we built out as we've kind of helped well over 100 clients now go from kind of like the opt-ins to triage calls to show rates to offers made to sales, and helping them kind of optimize the sales pipeline all the way through. And so these are some of the key pieces that we've kind of found to help the setters that make overall the whole system optimize for sales, which I know a lot of you guys are probably on commission basis, whether that's on show rates, on offers made, or on closed deals. And so the goal is to help you guys raise all of those numbers so that you can make more money, that you can prove that you're ready to move into the closing role, and to build the skills along the way so that you can crush it in those closing roles. So I've got a few pieces here. If Daniel, you can let me share my screen, then we can dive into the training for today.
You're good to share your screen. I have that setting turned off. Somebody tries
sick.
to screen. I don't want to show their screen. I'll just take it back.
Take the screen back. Yeah. Awesome. So let's dive in.
Awesome.
So today we're mostly going to be focusing on 3 main skills, guys, that kind of make it a little bit simpler and easier for you guys to, instead of kind of being overwhelmed with all of these tips and all of these tricks and all these different things that you need to focus on. We're just going to be focusing on the 3 main things that I see make the biggest difference for all the setters that I work with, to be able to get better results across the board. So definitely recommend you guys have a notepad and pen ready, because I sometimes talk a little bit fast, and we've only got an hour today. And I want to make that the most value-packed hour in your sales careers thus far, and probably in the future as well. So I don't want to waste any time. We'll really quickly dive into it. So essentially, I wanted to really quickly kind of give a little bit of background on myself. Daniel talked about it, but I want to make sure that you guys have a little bit more background and kind of have a little bit of understanding of kind of how I've come across these systems and the credibility behind them. I usually don't want to spend too much time on this because, like I said, I wanted to make this the most value-packed hour of your sales careers, and it's actually going to improve your income. And I can't do that if I'm talking about myself the whole time. So we'll just really quickly speed through this process and then get into the meat and potatoes of the training today. Essentially, a little bit of background. I started door-to-door in solar sales, failed out of a couple of those roles until I figured out a system that really worked for me. I managed to piece together a system that really kind of was repeatable, and took me from literally $0 in revenue to over $1 million in less than 8 months. going door to door selling solar. And now I'm currently managing and training a team of 15 appointment setters on 17 different offers with our done for you appointment setting service. And we've worked with over 100 different offers across the industry. Over the past 1.5, 2 years, we've literally sent hundreds of thousands of outbound messages, outbound calls. We've done tens of thousands of inbound triage calls, and that's just what we have the data for. We've actually done a lot more that we just don't have the numbers. For nearly a year, I've been running our setter follow-up division, which is basically just me and a team that I trained. And we call up the dead deals in our clients' pipelines, basically people who went through the marketing, opted in, had a triage call, showed up to the sales call, got an offer, had a follow-up, maybe showed up to the follow-up, and then ended up saying no or ghosting. We call those people up, figure out what the objection was, uncover it, handle it, and then rebook the sales call at the close. We probably dedicate about 2 hours a day to each client just to make sure that it's scalable. And we typically generate more than $50,000 for any given client in every given month. And that team has been killing it. It's really common for them to move up into closing roles or to advance their sales career after going through that team, because it's essentially like objection handling boot camp, just 8 hours a day on the phones, calling up people, handling objections. And now that you know a little bit about kind of how I built these systems, how I know that they work, and how I came across them, I want to dive into what we've learned from these systems to be able to help you guys 2x your income. And so there's going to be 3 main pieces here that we're going to kind of take one at a time. And then if there's time at the end, I want to go through this pretty quickly so that we can get to 2 examples of setter follow-up calls. This was the same prospect, the same objection. These calls were only 5 days apart. One of them ended up in a no, I don't want to move forward. And the other one ended up in a objection being handled, sales call being booked, that then turned into a $10,000 sale. So super hyped to show you guys kind of the difference between the good objection handling, the good follow-up, and the bad objection handling, the bad follow-up. But first, we gotta have to kind of lay the foundations for you to notice the concepts and be able to really like kind of absorb that and understand why it works and why it doesn't work. So the first thing that we wanted to really kind of implement with all of our team members, especially on setter follow-up, is understanding why people are saying and doing the things that they're doing. I put this first in our presentation because it is the most important thing. And the reason for that is because human beings learn through feedback loops. So what happens is typically at whatever skill you're doing, whatever thing you're trying to learn, you make an attempt, you either fail or you succeed, you get feedback from that, right? You either did it or you didn't, and then you adjust accordingly, right? And so through iterating that process many times, that's how the brain learns. And so for an example, if you're trying to shoot a bow and arrow, you pick up the bow and arrow, you take your first shot, maybe your first shot is way far to the right. Now you kind of get that feedback from that first attempt and you adjust accordingly, shooting to the left the next time, right? And so by doing that process over and over and over again, you get closer and closer and closer to the target. You start hitting the target more often, and before you know it, you're hitting it every time. What happens when you don't have an understanding of why people are telling you no or why people are telling you yes, what happens is you can't take advantage of that feedback loop in order to learn and improve quickly. And you're kind of trying to work against the human nature of how you learn. It's kind of like if you take up the bow and arrow and you take a shot, but you can't see the arrow. And so you can see the target, you can see that like there's no holes in the target, I didn't hit it, but you don't know where the arrow did go. You have no idea what you need to do to get a different result the next time. And because of that, you're just kind of shooting blindly in the dark. And maybe if you hit it every once in a while, you're getting lucky, right? Something else that we want to be really careful of, especially in the high ticket industry, is thinking that we know what's going wrong, but we don't actually know what's going wrong. And that's something that we see a lot because there's so many different kind of systems and there's so many different things in the online space. And so many different kind of like sales coaches, sales systems, all of these different things, right? And so essentially what's kind of happening there is like, if you shoot the bow and arrow and you go way too far to the right, but you think you shot way left, you try to adjust more to the right because you thought you shot left, but in reality, you shot right already and you're going further away from the target. You're optimizing for the wrong goal because you're getting the wrong feedback. You think you're doing the wrong thing. And so that feedback loop doesn't just stop working for you, it starts actively working against you. And so the really important thing is to make sure that you're getting the feedback from the right source. And typically what I do for that is we get the feedback from the client, from the prospect, to make sure that there is no possibility that we're wrong about what happened there. And so this is probably 80% of the training that I do with my teams is we just review calls. We break down every sentence, everything that the prospect says. We just kind of pause the call. We do a little bit of brainstorming. Why might they be saying that? And then we come up with questions that are going to either confirm or validate the things that we're thinking might be happening. So for example, if we're reviewing a call with Peter and Peter says that, I think this is a great program, but it's just too big of a risk for me right now. We'd stop the call and say, all right, why might Peter be saying that? He could be saying that because maybe he's in a place in his life right now where there's just no possibility for him to take risk. Like he's dead broke. Any risk is unacceptable. Or maybe he's in a place where he can take a lot of risks, but he just thinks that no matter what happens, this isn't going to work for him. Like this is just a risk that never makes sense. And so then I want to ask Peter a question and figure out which of those situations it is, so I know what's right or what's wrong. And so we might ask Peter, okay, got it. So just to make sure I'm on the same page, Peter, because obviously I don't want you to take any risks that don't make sense for you. Is it something where you're just kind of in a point in your life where any risks don't make sense? Or is it this risk in particular that seems like it's too great for you, right? And then we can get feedback directly from the client, from the prospect, and figure out what's going on and why are they not moving forwards, so that we know what the real objection is and how we need to handle it moving forwards. And so typically we just do this tons and tons of times. And as we build that skill in our trainings through repetition, we can then implement that on our calls. As we can get objections on our calls, prospect says something, we're not sure what's going on. We have already built that skill to come up with different theories about what might be going on here for real, and then how we can confirm or invalidate that. So that's kind of the first skill. And if you guys have any questions on that, feel free to drop it in the chat box, and I'll get to all of the questions at the end here, before we get to our call reviews. But the second skill that we wanted to really quickly touch on today is going to be mastering charisma. And there's a lot of preconceived notions attached to the idea and the concept of charisma. And there's a lot of confusion about what it is and what it isn't. And so I really quickly want to kind of wipe the slate clean and talk about what charisma is and what it isn't, so that we're on the same page when I'm talking about the word charisma, right? And so what charisma is not is a personality trait. It's not something that you're born with, and it's not some God-given ability to make everybody listen to you. What it is a learned skill. It's nothing more than just saying things in a certain way so that people are more open and more responsive while you're talking to them, right? So it's the format and the formulas and the way that you ask your questions. It's kind of the tonality and the cadence that you use. And it's these little things, pretty easily learnable skills. I've kind of identified 3 that I teach to my teams that work really well, and that you guys can probably pretty easily implement in your conversations to start getting better results. Where that's going to get a little bit tricky is using all of those in conjunction with each other to kind of master the skill. And that's something that we can kind of talk about in a few minutes here. But just focusing on each of these individually is kind of something that's going to get you guys better responses to your questions and better conversations overall with prospects. And so the first one is using excuses and justifications. Essentially, this is just giving someone a reason that you're asking something of them, and that makes them more likely to do it, right? Because the default when we're having a sales conversation, any question or anything that you say to a prospect, they think automatically that the reasoning you're saying that, the reason behind that question is to get their money, right? And so by using some excuse or justification, you eliminate that kind of sales resistance. You say, hey, I'm not asking you this so that I can take your money. I'm just asking for this reason, right? And it lets their guard down a little bit so that they can tell you the truth. They can tell you the real answer, what they're thinking, and they don't have to have their guard up because they think you're going to ask them for their cash, right? And extra bonus points here, if you can frame it in a way where the excuse, the justification is to help you, because the reason that this works really well is that part of human psychology is wanting to solidify our social status. And we can do that by helping people who need it. Like, for example, like on the extreme end of that scale, the firefighter who saves the kid from a burning building is a hero. He's on the front page of the newspaper. He's on the 5 o'clock news. Everybody loves him, right? The same thing kind of happens on a smaller scale every day. When someone asks you for help, or someone asks you, when you donate at the grocery store, you feel good because you're kind of solidifying your social status. And that goes way back to like ancient human psychology about how we used to be in packs, and the alpha male would provide for everybody. And so he would solidify his status as the alpha by providing for everybody. And that earned him rights to eat food first, to get the first choice of everything. And a lot of benefits come with helping other people. And so that's just kind of like some psychological reasons why framing it in that way helps you the best. And here's just a couple of examples so that you guys can start to implement these things right away after this training. So for these first 2 are kind of like for follow-up. If someone didn't buy, you can call them back up and just say, hey, John, just looking to get a little bit of feedback as to kind of like what you were looking for and why you think this wasn't such a good fit. That way we can help other people in the future, right? And so now it's not because like, hey, I want you to close on this deal right now. It's like, hey, I want to improve our product. I have other reasons. And so that lets John's guard down, and it lets him give you the real answers. The other one for follow-up would be just wanting to get a little bit of market research and feedback so that we can improve our marketing efforts. What was it that you saw in the marketing that kind of attracted your attention? What were you looking for? And why did you feel like that might not be something that we can provide for you? Right. And that gets the real objection. Why is this not something that we can provide for you? That's the real concern, right? Another example would be if we're qualifying on the front end before we're getting a sales call on the calendar, and we need to figure out kind of like a revenue goal, right? Instead of just saying, hey, what's your revenue goal in a kind of a salesy way, I can use an excuse or a justification to get a better response to that question. Like, hey, Mark, just so that we kind of have like a goal to start with, and then we can reverse engineer from there and figure out how to help you hit that. And if we can help you hit that, what would you be looking to make kind of like after you join the program? Is there any kind of goal that you have in mind? Right. And that those kinds of things get better responses to your questions. And so the life hack here is try adding just so that in front of any of the questions on your script, and come up with any excuse or justification that makes sense in that situation, right? Just so that I'm on the same page. What is it that you're hoping to achieve? That way I can kind of be upfront with you if that's something that we can help you with, right? Some kind of excuse or justification, and you can change it up so you're not saying just so that with every single question, but start adding a few of those excuses and justifications to your questions, and it'll start to get people to open up to you more, right? And the second piece of charisma is framing everything that you say in the best interest of the prospect. And a little bit of background on this is this works because the same concept that economists and psychologists use when they use the term rational actor to explain kind of like people, and they use it to explain marketplaces. And it basically just means like a rational actor is someone who acts in the best interest of their own goals. And so it's pretty safe for us to assume as setters that everybody that we're talking to on a daily basis is going to be a rational actor, right? They want to act in the best interest of achieving their own goals. And that's something that you can use to your advantage. And here's a few examples of that. Maybe if they're expressing frustration, you can tell them, maybe they say that we're on a marketing offer and they're cold calling and they're just frustrated with cold calling. You can tell them that you want to help them to avoid the thing that's frustrating them. Look, totally understand, Noah, that like cold calls are probably the most frustrating thing in the world. I want to help you move away from that. And so here, you can start to kind of give a little bit of details. Maybe if they have a lot of questions and they're asking about specifics of the offer and you can't give that information, you want to help them to get the answers, right? It's framed in their best interest. Look, Jonathan, totally understand if you've got a ton of questions here, and I would love to help you get those answers. It's just, I'm not the lead generation expert, and so I don't want to give you misleading information here, right? So what I think I would love to kind of like take this conversation to the next level with someone who can give you those answers. I just need to get a couple of questions answered first, if that's all right with you, right? If that's not too much to ask, framing it in their best interest. If, for example, they have goals, you want to help them achieve them. If they have struggles, you want to help them overcome them. Whatever they're invested in achieving or avoiding, whatever their interests are, you mirror that in your own language. Because when we frame everything that we say in the best interest of the prospect, when they're a rational actor, it's almost stupid not to listen to you, right? They're practically eating out of your hands, because who doesn't want to listen to the guy who wants to help me achieve the things I want to achieve, hit my goals, overcome my struggles, move away from the things that are frustrating me? Everybody wants to listen to that person. And so it makes everything that you're saying more attractive to them. And all you have to do is kind of listen for what they're saying to you and mirror that, right? Anytime that they're saying for things that involve frustrations, goals, and emotions, use that and just kind of mention it in your responses, and you'll get better results. And then the third piece of this, and the final one, is a little bit smaller. It doesn't need to be the main focus of you guys' attention, but you can't ignore it either. And that's going to be your tonality and cadence, right? Because nobody wants to buy from Eeyore the donkey. If you get on a call and you're like, hey, how you doing, Daniel? What brings you to the call today? Nobody really wants to talk to that guy. But if you jump on the call and you're like, hey, Yantha, super stoked to get to know you today and get to learn a little bit more about your business. I saw a little bit on the application that you filled out, but I just wanted to ask you personally, what was it that brought you to the call today, right? And you notice kind of like the inflection in my voice, I'm like excited, and that's someone that you want to listen to. That's someone that you want to talk to. And so it's something that it's too important for you to just completely ignore it. And so I recommend going back and listening to some of your guys' calls and just asking yourself, is this someone that I would want to talk to? And when you listen to your own calls, sometimes it's like really cringy. And those are the things that point out the glaring problems in your tonality and the questions that you're asking. And so reviewing your own calls in general, super, super important. And so all of these three pieces of charisma kind of play together in harmony. And so this is the kind of trickier piece, is mastering each of them to be able to use them all together, so that when someone gives you an objection, you can you can use your excuses and justifications to ask the right questions in a charismatic way, so that people are more open to what you're saying, and you can say it in a good tonality. And then you can now ask the questions that are usually uncomfortable, that are usually tough to ask, and that usually raise people's sales resistance. It makes it okay to ask those questions so that you can dig to the root of the objections, what's really going on in the prospect's mind, so that you can actually handle their real concerns. And so that's super, super critical. And then the third and final piece of kind of this 3-piece puzzle is the thing that's going to help you guys the most to advance into sales gigs. This is almost as important as understanding why people say what they do, but not quite, because we need to use that feedback loop to learn. But before we talk about some of the right ways that we can do this, we need to really quickly talk about the wrong ways, because pushing past no is kind of like investing, in that it's more important to not be wrong than it is to be right. And so what I mean by that is, like, for example, in investing, like if you have $100 and you compound 1% every day, that ends up being something like 3,700%. Whereas if you take a big loss, like a 50% loss, you can't just make 50% back, because if I had $100 and I lost 50%, I have $50. If I make 50% back, I only have $75. You need to double your money. So it's more important to not lose than it is to get that like 1,000% return. And we'll talk a little bit more in a second about how this applies to sales. But it's really important to understand as well, the reason that yes has anything meaning in our conversations is because there is an option to say no. For example, when you were a kid, you probably had no choice but to go to school. And so the fact that you went to school didn't mean a whole lot, because you didn't have the option to say no. It didn't mean that you were going to be encouraged and engaged and you were going to be psyched to be there. And if you had had the choice to not go without any consequences in your life, you probably would have taken it. And so that's what happens with our prospects. When we don't actively give them the choice to say no, is kind of counterintuitive as it is. They say yes because they feel like they don't have an option. But unlike you, when you went to school, they do have the ability to not show up without any meaningful consequences in their lives. It's not like when you were in school and they were going to call your mom and you were going to get in trouble. Nothing is going to happen for them if they don't show up to this next call. And so that's probably what's going to end up happening if they never had the opportunity to say no. Or if they do show up, they're probably not going to be engaged, and they're definitely not going to be buying the product. And so giving an opportunity to say no and framing it in a way where you're not trying to pressure the yes is something that counterintuitively is going to get you higher quality bookings, and it's going to skyrocket your show rates. I mean, I had a setter that I worked with that had literally 0% show rates because he was kind of pressuring and pushing for the no in the wrong ways, and he wasn't giving the option to say no. And so when they did the time came for the call, they didn't want to show up because they never really wanted to do that in the first place. After about 3 weeks of working on this, the show rate skyrocketed from 0% to 75. And so that's how big of a difference it can make, just giving the option to say no on your calls. Chris Voss kind of calls that yes, the counterfeit yes, because they're saying yes because they feel like no isn't an option. They're not saying it because they want to move forward. They want to say yes. They're interested in the program and they want to buy. They just don't have any other options available to them. At least that's what they feel like. And so that's why it's super important that we give the option to say no. And then the other major mistake that we need to avoid as setters is glossing over objections and just kind of booking the sales call anyways, because the closer can deal with that on the next call, right? Because what ends up happening in those situations is the prospect is going to continue to think about the concern long after our conversation with them ended, right? And then they end up overthinking things. They end up talking themselves out of it. And that means more no-shows for us. For example, if I'm on the phone with Peter and Peter asks me about a guarantee, and I'm just like, Peter, it's a great question. You can ask that on the next call. And I kind of dismiss his question. After I get off the phone with Peter, Peter's going to say, well, the guy on the last program did that too. And then they scanned me and I didn't get any results. And, I really need to know that there's going to be a guarantee. And he starts just kind of like really overthinking it. And then he ends up no-showing. Whereas we could just acknowledge the fact that he has this concern. Like, totally get it, Peter. And I definitely understand that, like, you've had a bad experience in the past and that you really want to make sure this is something that's going to work for you. And that's definitely something that we can work with you on. We can make sure that you feel really confident that you're going to get these results. But, I don't have all the information. So I really recommend you kind of write those questions down. Any other questions that you have, and you can ask Conrad on that next call and just address the fact that he has that concern. And what that actually does, kind of like as a bonus thing, is he originally had asked me a yes or no question. Do I have a guarantee? And I answered in a vague way where now he has like 8 more questions. And the only way to get the answers to those 8 more questions is to show up to the next call. And so now these open loops, all these questions that he has, and he needs to show up. He needs to continue the process if he's ever going to get those answers. And so each question that he has now is another reason for him to show up. So now that we've kind of addressed the 2 major mistakes that I see setters make all the time for pushing past no, we can talk about the right ways to do it. And the most important thing to do this the right way is to just keep the conversation going. Daniel and I were actually just talking about yesterday, objections that we don't know how to handle and what we do when we come across that situation. I told Daniel, like, I just keep the conversation going. Like, I just say literally anything and talk about like what anything else while I'm thinking about how I can address that objection. And then I'll circle back to it when I've figured it out. But what's important is that I keep the conversation going, because I can't turn a no into a yes if I'm no longer talking to you, right? Like, that door is closed once you get off the call. And so the biggest thing is to make sure that we're still on the call, to keep that door open, to be able to get more information, to then change the equation of if that makes sense for them or if that doesn't make sense for them, right? And so from that point, the main goal is going to be just figuring out what the real objection and their concern is. And this is how it's more important to not be wrong than it is to be right, because we push past in the wrong ways, and then we kind of like, we do a lot of high pressure sales tactics. What ends up happening is this prospect sales resistance is way up here. They might hang up the phone on you. They definitely don't want to talk to you. And so now that door is closed. And so maybe you don't have to handle the objection the right way and like cover it right then and there, but you definitely can't do it the wrong way, because then you lose the opportunity entirely. So it's just more important to not be wrong than it is to be right, and be careful about kind of how you go about that. And a trick that I've taught to my setters is to go back and review their own calls and notice when people's sales resistance go way up, when they're more resistant to the questions that you're asking, and figure out what did I say that caused that? Because it's typically something that you said that caused them to get kind of put their guard up. From there, handling objections typically gets pretty easy. Once you kind of figure out what the real objection is, you can kind of use those charismatic tools and skills that we talked about a couple minutes ago to ask the right questions to figure out what the real objection is. And then it's typically, you can solve that with a little bit of product knowledge. They didn't know that there's payment plans. They didn't know there's this guarantee. They didn't know that this happens. They misinterpreted that. There's typically just miscommunication that the closers miss on the calls, because they're not perfect either. And so you just need a little bit more product knowledge and to know what the actual objection is. That's going to be about 50% of your objections. The other 50% of your objections is going to be some deep-rooted beliefs that these people have. For example, something like they feel like they're just not an entrepreneur and they can't start a business, like they're always going to fail. And like that's a whole nother training on how to change that belief and that objection handling techniques that are involved with those objections. But just knowing what the real objection is and knowing your offer is going to be enough for the vast majority. And this is probably going to increase the amount of opportunities you can put on the sales calendar by like 50%. And then the last piece on objection handling is using the feedback frame. That's what I call it, at least. And this is the tool that I lean on absolutely the most when I'm on dials, when I'm on calls, is when someone gives me an objection, I ask them for feedback. I'm like, hey, John, totally understand that this is something that's probably too big of a risk for you to take right now. And I can appreciate that. But just if you would be willing to give a little bit of feedback in regards to that, what makes you feel like this is such a big risk for you? And now the question is no longer like, hey, I'm trying to get you to pay me money right now. Why the fuck do you think this is such a big risk? And it now becomes like, hey, I'm a business owner. I'm trying to like improve my offer. I'm trying to improve my sales process. And I need a little bit more information. Would you be able to help me out? And so John's much more willing to answer the second question than it is the first question, where I'm just trying to take his money. So I'll really quickly hit to all the questions that we've got in the inbox here. Make sure we go. If you guys have any questions on either the learning how to understand what people say, the things that they do, what like the 3 pieces of charisma, or pushing past no in the right ways, shoot me in the chat box right now, and then we'll answer any questions, and then we'll dive into some call reviews, because we've still got about 30 minutes here.
Yeah, Carlos mentioned that learning the part about giving them the option to say no would really increase his show rate, and I've seen this like firsthand. What is the like when you flip this, what was the statistic you put into place? It was like you said 0 to what show rate? It was like almost a 0.
Yeah, it was 0 to 75 show rate. Over like each. That was like a 1 week with 0% show rate, and then the 3rd week of working on this was 75% show rate. And then it was basically asking like no-based questions, right? And so I don't know if you guys have read the book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, but it's a pretty good book. I recommend it. It's one of the classics in sales, and it's essentially just like asking, instead of asking for a yes, asking for a no. Like, hey, Daniel, would that be like a terrible idea, or would you like me to set that up for you, right? Instead of just assuming that you're going to say yes and like, great, sounds like this is something that's great to fit for you, I'm going to go ahead and schedule that call. And you never had the opportunity to say, like, I didn't even ask you. You didn't have the opportunity to say no. And then the call goes onto the calendar. You never wanted to show up in the first place, and now you no show. right? Instead, I could say, hey, Daniel, I don't know if it makes sense for you, but what I could do is set up a little bit of a longer time for you to ask all those specific questions, because it seems like there's a few things you wanted to get a little bit more information about. I could set up that longer time. I don't know if that would be just like a waste of your time, or if you'd like me to make that happen for you, right? And I'm almost like framing it as a favor. Like, I could do this. I don't know. Is that something that you want me to do? And I'm asking in a way that makes it really okay for you to say no, instead of assuming the yes, because that works for closing when they're making a big commitment. But doesn't matter which one they say yes, or first say yes or no. I don't think it matters too much. It's going to be probably a preference of style, but I typically train my team to say no first, so that you can make sure that it's kind of like the first option, right? It's like the recency bias. When the first option is no, it's like, it's okay to say no. Like, I'm assuming you're going to say no, and it's almost a surprise if you're going to say yes.
Yeah.
And that makes it so that like you don't have to feel guilty, because there's a lot of people who kind of like they're people pleasers, right? They never want to say no to anybody. Right?
It's like,
so if I'm assuming
the
you're
girl
gonna
who
say
gives
no,
her phone. It's like the girl who gives her phone number just to give her phone number and shoo the guy away.
yeah, or like a fake phone number because she doesn't want to say I'm not interested.
Yeah,
right? Exactly. And so, and instead of saying that, maybe I'm just like, hey, here's my number. You can text me if you want. Like, I'm giving you the opportunity, right? And so that's kind of like the dating analogy of what we're doing here is I'm assuming that you're going to say no, and I'm making it okay for you to say no. And that makes it so that you're like, if you say yes, I know damn sure you are committed to showing up, because you had every opportunity to say no and you didn't take it, right? And so I would say that the best way to practice this is try to flip it on its head. Whatever question that you're asking right now, you're probably asking it in a way that you're asking for yes. Try to flip it in a way that you're asking for no. Like, hey, would that be like, instead of saying, hey, do you want to set this call up? I could say, hey, like, would that be a waste of your time? Right? Where like, if he says yes to that question, what he's really saying is, this is a waste of my time. I don't want to do this. Right? Try to flip it on its head where you're kind of asking the reverse, like, do you not want to do this?
Yeah.
And so
it comes down to Socratic selling almost, because
exactly,
people hate for you to project your ideas onto them, but what you're doing is now it's like, no, actually that wouldn't be a bad idea. So they think that it's the Socratic part. So
it's their idea, right?
It's their idea, right?
Exactly. And so, yeah, just flip that on its head. But it seems like we don't have any more questions. So I'm going to dive into some of our call reviews here. And so for context, guys, this is a call that someone on my team did. This was a new offer and they were new on the team. So we're just kind of getting ramped up and learning how to handle objections. And so I've got a few notes here, but we'll really quickly dive into this. And then we'll quickly do an analysis between us, and then we'll move to the call that I did with this person and how I was able to take the same prospect, same objection, and turn it into a $10,000 sales call. And so let's get started here. Just to confirm, can you guys hear this?
No, we can't.
All right, let me see. Share computer sound. There we go. Always forget that piece.
Hello?
Hey,
All
this is
good?
Lionel.
Yeah, speaking.
Yeah, this is Kayla over with Ahmad's team at the 90-Day Pipeline. How you doing?
I'm good. Yourself?
I can't complain too much. Living the life. I was actually just kind of going through and cleaning up our systems, and I came across your profile, so I wanted to give you a quick ring here because it seems like we might have been a good fit to work together. So I just kind of wanted to see if you had found a better solution for building a consistent pipeline using LinkedIn.
A really quick note on this introduction. I wanted you guys to notice that she kind of went through, hey, seems like we're a good fit to work together. Did you find something else? Because this is a really good introduction, and it's getting straight to the point of like seeing if there's an opportunity. But you'll notice the difference when I call the same person and how I kind of frame it as like, can you help me? Instead of, can you buy this product? And the difference in the conversations that we have. But we'll keep going.
No, I'm not using LinkedIn at the moment. I'm using my website and it's doing well. I might in the future change or adapt to it. For now, that's what I'm doing. And so far so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. With the current kind of strategies, I know you said you were kind of just using your website. Were you still trying to like scale your business and gain more clients, or were you kind of capped out at the moment?
Okay, so this guy asked, we asked, are you still looking for this product, basically? And he gave our first objection of kind of like, I'm not looking to scale right now. And so I wanted you guys to really quickly take a minute and think about what you would say to this objection. while I'm kind of running through how this kind of plays out, right? So she asks a pretty decent question where she's asking for an opportunity, like, hey, are you still looking to scale? She's saying, is there still a gap here where you need help, right? But something that I probably would have done a little bit differently, and that kind of we taught her throughout the next 6 months that she was on this offer, was going to be kind of like, one, how is that one going right now? Like, it kind of asking the same question, but in a different way, which is kind of like, hey, just for market research and kind of like looking at other solutions. How's that going for you, right? What are you doing that's different and that solved the problem for you, right? And that's this achieving the same thing, looking for a gap, right? And the other question that I might have asked is, what made you that seem like a better option for you, right? Whatever solution you found, what made that seem better? And looking for kind of like a flaw in the logic, right? For example, I'm pretty sure this guy is going off of referrals. Everybody who's on a marketing offer knows that like referrals are really unreliable. It's a terrible way to grow your business, and you need a lot more than just referrals. And so we can kind of look for that flawed logic of like, oh yeah, I'm growing with referrals, I'm good for now. And so think about kind of some of the ways that you guys might have handled that objection and how that differs from what I've done or what Kayla does here.
For sure, we would like to expand.
Okay.
However, right now, not in the near future, because operations, it's important that operations follow the growth. So
Right.
It's right now, for the next couple of months, we want to grow more organically and not put too much pressure on the operations.
Now, something really interesting here is this guy went through a whole process. Remember, he went through marketing, he opted in, he had a triage call, he got set up for a sales call, showed up for the sales call, got an offer, had a follow-up, showed up for the follow-up, had a second follow-up, and ghosted. So he went through a hell of a process for a marketing offer, considering that he didn't want to scale his business. So sometimes prospects will say kind of basically anything, but we want to think about like, why would he say something like that after going through that whole process that clearly indicates he wanted to scale his business? And it's probably just because like he doesn't want to talk to us. He's got really high sales resistance right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, no problem. The reason I kind of asked is because LinkedIn is kind of like the tactic that we use, but we're more geared towards helping you with the strategy of your offer, right? So making sure that like if you're charging, let's say $10,000 for your offer, and that's kind of like the lower ticket version, and the 1 or 2 clients that you have are like $50,000, really making sure we're helping you tweak your offer to target those $50,000 offer clients.
So not sure if you guys noticed, but what's going on here is she's kind of feature selling, which is something that I see a lot of setters kind of leaning on when they're not sure how to handle an objection. But what actually happens with feature selling, and I always say that like feature selling is one of the worst ways that we can sell, because the analogy that I use is like if I say that I walked into a bar and I saw the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my entire life, each one of you guys has a different idea in your head of like who that most beautiful person is. Like maybe Daniel's thinking of a girl who's got like blonde hair and blue eyes and she's a certain height, but Noah's got a completely different idea. So like we all have different things that we like in people, and as well as in offers and in solutions for our business problems, right? But if I were to say that, like, to start to describe that girl, right? Maybe I say that she had red hair and green eyes. Right away, those like few details have eliminated like 80% of you guys. Now you no longer think that this is the most attractive person in the world. And the more details I go into, the less likely what I'm describing matches exactly what you think is the most beautiful person in the world. And so that's kind of what happens when we feature sell, is like we're just kind of guessing at what we think they want and kind of like what we can offer them with what we have. What we should do instead is ask them questions like, what were you looking for, and sell them the thing that they want. We want to sell them their version of the most beautiful person in the world, instead of kind of ruining the illusion and kind of describing something that doesn't match what they're looking for. And so now this kind of 3-minute call, we have a decent amount to break down, but this kind of last piece coming up is like where we make the critical mistake and kind of lose this opportunity.
And turning your whales into your regulars, if that makes sense.
I see. No,
Yeah,
totally. I'm following your word, and I like what you guys are doing. It's just not the right time for me right now.
Yeah, of course.
And eventually.
Yeah, I gotcha. I just wanted to connect and kind of see where you were at and see if you had found a different solution. It sounds like everything's going pretty well for you. So
So the critical mistake here is we end the conversation. Like at that point, like there is no opportunity for you to continue to find more information. There is no opportunity to turn the no into a yes. Whereas we could have said, no worries, Elena, when should I follow up with you? Why is that going to be a better time? What's going to change between now and then? And there's opportunities to continue the conversation that we didn't take here. So now let's check out the same call, the same prospect, the same objection, different call, 5 days later. which is when I called him up because the tracking was off. He ended up back in my list, but it was a good thing because it turned into a sale.
Hey, Lionel, this is Patrick Deneen here, just reaching out to you from Ahmad's team at the 90 Day Pipeline. Just wanted to quickly check in with you here because I was looking for some feedback. You had a conversation last week with one of our new team members, Kayla. Just wanted to get some insights there.
So notice how you can use literally anything that happened at all between, Kayla used something that happened 6 months ago. I used something that happened 5 days ago, but anything that has happened with the prospect is a reason to have a conversation. You just you can use anything that's happened as an excuse or a justification. And then the other thing is, notice the difference was like Kayla's asking, hey, have you found a solution? Are you ready to buy? And I asked like, hey, can you help me? Can you provide some feedback? And the difference in conversations, I mean, I have a 10-minute conversation with this guy because he's a lot more open to talking to me from the start.
Yeah, look, we already talked, and it's not the good time for me right now. I'm quite busy, so we decided to postpone our next meeting maybe in a couple months.
Yeah, no worries, Lionel. Out of curiosity, because it seems like when you first reached out to us, that lead generation was kind of a main factor. What was it that you ended up finding that solved that issue for you?
I'm just doing.
So notice how I used some of those charismatic skills that we talked about earlier. Hey, just kind of like out of curiosity. And I didn't say it like I used inflection in my voice, just like, hey, out of curiosity, Daniel, what was it that you found that ended up working for you? Right? I say it in a specific way that gets a really good result. Right. And the other really important thing that I did there was I agreed with him before I handled the objection. If you guys aren't doing that, you definitely need to be doing it, because if he says that, now's not a good time, and I say, yeah, now is a good time. Now we're just kind of saying things that are in direct contradiction with each other. We start to butt heads. Right. And if you have like a family that's really political and you go to like Thanksgiving dinner and your uncle says that Trump's great and your aunt says that, Biden's great, and now they're saying things that are in direct contradiction with each other and they butt heads, and it just devolves into an argument. And it's no longer a productive conversation. We need to avoid that in our sales conversations. And so I always, always, always agree with them before handling the objection.
Like, I'm just getting referrals from people actually in my network.
And notice how when we asked him, hey, what's working so well in your business? He starts to kind of stutter and mumble and ramble. And he kind of is showing that he's kind of bullshitting me right now. Right. And so that's my sign that like, that's where I need to dig deeper. And so kind of pay attention to your prospects and notice these things.
And also my website is doing well. I'm one of the good ones, the number one on Google for my industry. So the website is doing well. So I'm quite busy at the moment. So that's why.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense, Lionel. Out of curiosity, what was kind of the difference, just to gather a little bit of data on like kind of what you were doing for referrals between now and when you first reached out?
Well, it's not. I didn't do much, to be honest. It's when I first reached out, I already done everything for referrals. However, it takes time, and there is a kind of a lag between when you do the actual business development and when you get referrals from partners. So, and after a couple of months, half a year or something, then we saw the difference. So that's why I think mainly. However, for sure we want to, like, I don't want to rely only on referrals, but at the moment I'm too busy and I don't have much time I need to put this work right now.
So this is another situation where we got to kind of ask, like, why is he saying that? Like, he's saying I'm too busy, I don't want to do this, but he's also saying I don't want to rely on referrals and I know I need to do something else. And so these are the kind of situations that I recommend you guys listen to your calls and ask specific questions. And Daniel, feel free to stop me here whenever we're going up on time. I've just got one more piece in about a minute in this call that I think is going to be super helpful for these guys.
You're good. You're good.
I don't have much time to explore other venues, but I'm following what you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, Lionel. Well, I appreciate that because it's super helpful to kind of understand a little bit more about the alternatives to kind of the methodologies that we use, right? And the alternatives in the marketplace. Out of curiosity, about how consistent is that for you? Is it kind of like ups and downs, or is it consistent 2, 3, 4 deals every month?
Just drilling on what he was nervous about.
I think between the website and the referrals, it becomes consistent, but it's both of them are up and downs. But between the two of them, it becomes more predictable. I don't know if it makes sense. That's it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, even if referrals are kind of going down, maybe website goes up.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. Well, I don't want to hold you up here, Lionel. Is there maybe, I know you mentioned that you don't want to kind of rely on referrals forever. Would there be a better timeline to kind of reach out and have a different conversation with you about that?
So notice how I'm kind of like faking that I'm going to end the call here. I'm 3 minutes into this call, but I've got another 7 minutes that I continue to talk to him. And so what I'm actually doing here is not trying to give up the conversation, but Lionel has really high sales resistance. And so by pretending I'm kind of like ending the sales conversation here, now it makes it okay for him to drop his guard down, right? He's like, okay, this guy's like agreed that like I'm not going to buy today. And so now it makes it okay for him to say what's really on his mind. And watch what happens as soon as I say like, hey, is there a better time to call you?
Yeah, the thing with you guys is like I like what you do. However, my only issue is like I'm more like hidden, and I like the anonymity. And I feel like 90 Days Pipeline is you have to throw yourself a lot out there to gain some traction and expose yourself as a consultant. And I'm not sure I'm there yet. That's one of my concerns with 90 Day Pipeline.
Yeah, no worries, Lionel.
Expose yourself.
Out of curiosity, what exactly did you mean by kind of expose yourself as a consultant? Is it just kind of being out in the marketplace and kind of producing content and showing your face a lot is something that you prefer to let the work speak for itself, or just kind of wanted to get some clarity on that?
So really quickly, what happened there, guys, is I said like, hey, you don't have to buy right now. I'm okay with that. You know, he feels comfortable, like, I'm not, there's no pressure for me to buy today. And he tells me what's really on his mind, which is like, he's an introvert. He's like, this is a content marketing offer. And it's like, you show your face, you make a video, you post it online. And he's just nervous to make a video and post it online. And that's like his actual objection. That's the reason that he didn't buy in the first place. And he just needed to kind of like have his sales resistance lower to let his guard down to be able to tell me that. And so then what I did was I having been able to build the skill from practice with my team so much, to take that information, come up with a few theories. Why might he be saying that? Why might he be saying that like he doesn't want to put his face out there, right? And my first thought is that he's probably introverted, but I need to make sure that I'm correcting for the right thing and I'm dealing with the actual objection. And so then my next question is just to confirm that that's the case. Hey, Lionel, what exactly do you mean by like putting yourself out there? Is it just kind of like, putting your face out there and being really public about it, and you prefer to kind of like stay behind the scenes? And ask him kind of like, hey, are you just like more introverted? And that's the figuring out what the real objection is. Because if he's just more introverted, then like you can probably find a way to content market without making a video with your face on it. You can make videos that don't star you. You can make other kinds of content. You can do like images. You can do like long form copy. There's a ton of different types of content, and you guys know about your offers. What are those kind of like unique situations, and how you can work around an objection like this?
No, exactly. That's. I mean, that's showing your face a lot and exposing yourself. This is something I don't feel very comfortable doing right now.
And so you notice how I said, hey, is it just like you kind of like you prefer to stay in the background? And Lionel's like, yes, it's that. It's exactly that. And that's how you guys know that you found like the real objection and the actual concern that he has. He's like, wow, this guy actually understands me. And like I highly relate to what he just said. Right. And that's like, they'll get excited when you like actually are able to identify and put in your own words the things that are kind of like haunting them and plaguing them. And like, they're scared to move forward because of that. Right. Because it's kind of like an emotional thing. And so from here, we essentially just kind of like sell him on the idea of marketing. Like, hey, if this was like advertisement, would you do advertisements? Great. Well, if like you could do advertisements, like if you could get the same results as like Facebook ads, but you didn't have to show your face, is that something that would work? Well, great. Content marketing is kind of just like that. You don't have to show your face, and it's like ads that you don't have to pay for, man. And so then maybe it's worth a conversation. And we booked the sales call. He ended up closing the deal. So that's all the time that we have for today, guys. We've got like 5 minutes left. As much as I would love to finish up the call, but hopefully this was super helpful. Is there any other last minute questions that you guys have? Feel free to pop them in the chat box here, and I'll do my best to answer all the questions that you got.
Yeah, everybody try to get your chats in here, but big announcement. So Pat and I actually want to work with 3 people on a one-on-one basis to help get their set close ratios improved. I mean, basically double your income as a setter. And the way we're going to do it is, you can just pretty much DM me on Facebook or even here in the chat. We're going to just set up a 15-minute call. So regardless or not, if, you want to work with us or not, if you want like a 15-minute consultation with me or Pat, just go ahead and drop it in the chat or send us a private message, and I'll make a note to reach out to you. And just a little incentive for the first person who wants to reach out, we'll give you a free one-on-one coaching session with Pat himself, the man, the legend, the top G. And yeah, we can get it going. The reason we're only taking on 3 people is because I've done a few one-on-one coaching clients. Like Jessica's a one-on-one coaching client. She is and a testament. She's made a lot more than your average setter, and she's getting promoted to closing the last time I checked in on Jess. Another one of my one-on-one clients is Brandon Henry, who, if you guys are in my private coaching program, you know he's the most successful client I've had. He has like 19 LLCs now, and you know, he just like took it above and beyond. But we're only working with 3 people because, to be honest, we're already helping a lot of people on our internal team. So Pat and I have internal teams that we're working with right now. I actually haven't really been selling my private mastermind as much. So we're working with a lot of people trying to help them build these skill sets, but we want to bring in a few more people and give you priority access to some of the opportunities that we have. And they're limited, right? Because like everybody talks about being the best sales professional and whatnot, but like being on the right offer is very important as well. So coming in and working with Pat and myself, you would get, you know, priority access to those opportunities as well. And we can't offer that to everybody. So we're going to be working with 3 people, and we're doing free 15-minute consultations, but we're going to reach out to you. We might reach out to you, you guys, just to get some feedback on this training, because it might be an offer that we want to have in the future as a group coaching program. So any feedback is super appreciated. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything else? No, that's pretty much it. Just go ahead and privately, I see a couple people privately messaged me already. I'll get back to you here shortly. I'll write your guys' names down, but if you guys want to DM me on Facebook and ask me a couple questions about it, again, free 15-minute consultations, even if you're already in my private coaching program. You guys, like, I know there's a few of you guys in here that are already in it, but like, if you guys want to work with Pat, who has a lot of these strategies in his back pocket, go ahead and shoot me a DM. Cool. All right, you guys. Thank you everybody for showing up. I super appreciate it. And yeah, this has been our largest live event. We had over 25 people in here at one point. So I'm just glad we got to go over some of these lessons that setters don't really have access to. I don't really see anybody with, you know, like anybody teaching this stuff. Like, Pat, have you ever gotten an offer and the setters are doing anything else besides like connecting people with really warm leads?
No, definitely not.
Never. I've never seen it. I've never been on an offer and be like, oh, like this setters. I mean, some of like the big like sales organizations, they are like, you know, teaching their setters how to handle objections, and you learn kind of as you go, like if you pay for your own training, but like there's not really anybody, any organizations doing this for their setters, because high ticket sales, I mean, we're like micro businesses, right? Micro businesses compared to like large corporations and like companies in the corporate world where they have like teams of like 20 and they got budgets because they got angel investors who just invested $3.6 million into funding the company. You know, like we don't have that. We're literally just like starting from scratch. Some of us are lucky if we get any type of training. So feel free to reach out, you guys, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.